This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchion Ford. Bird Culchion Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoak and Grayson Grundhoefer.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Bearcast on 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com. I'm Craig Smoak, joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer, got Jack McKenzie and Garrett Ross behind the scenes producing. Definitely appreciate their help as always. And another big week with a lot of headlines, a lot of movement, a lot of transfer portal stuff, and a little bit of hoops to add in as well, but do appreciate everybody who's tuning in. And, second week in a row of going live on YouTube, but for the folks who usually catch us on the podcast after the fact that always listen, we do appreciate you as well. But, Grayson, another busy week, and we've actually got, though, some time parameters here, whereas the last few weeks have just been kind of like, everybody refers to it as the Wild Wild West. We've actually got an end date that's coming up here in just, a couple of days to the transfer portal, this first window. It's been a very active window for Baylor football. They've been, all over the place in terms of picking up guys, losing guys, and just trying to find their way to reshape this roster. So a couple of days ago, man, are we kind of feeling okay about where they are? I know we're going to break down the latest, biggest commitment, which was huge at a huge position of need, but just what have you made of these last couple of weeks, last month of activity?
Well, I mean, it's been really important because like we talked about, that was a huge visit weekend that they had where they had all the transfers on campus, and they figured out a way to have a lot of success from that weekend. They obviously found their quarterback in the transfer portal. They addressed some other positions of need. They even did that in the first kind of bit of the transfer portal where they found a wide receiver that could be their wide receiver one in Keytron Jackson. They found a really good running back in Dominic Richardson, addressed the offensive line. Like, they've done a lot of really important things for this roster. And now we got a couple days left. And really the only thing that I see really, when you're looking at it is, could they bring in another quarterback who we've talked about? Maybe a Tristan Jibia from Oregon State. Maybe they look at cornerback, which again is still kind of puzzling that they only have taken one cornerback at this point with Isaiah Dunston. I feel like that's another area to address. But in general, Craig, I think we've talked about it quite a bit. I know we've written about it a lot on the site, but what they've done so far has been just almost a complete roster turnover, and not to the level that it's like Oklahoma State or anything like that, but just very much addressing positions of need and bringing in guys who they feel like are upgrades at those positions of need. And it's been really fantastic to watch, and something that, frankly, they should have done before last season as well.
Well, there was one big-name departure that we'll get to, a fan favorite that is no longer on the roster, and the running back room needed to have something give, so we've had that movement now, and, these next 2 days will be probably relatively quiet, I would think. I know there's been a couple of things out there, but it's very hazy on whether that's going to happen in time. I think we both are thinking of the same thing, just because of how the whole process works. We'll say that, but leaving that for, I guess, a later date because there's only about 2 days left, like we mentioned now, before the window. Let's get into what's happened most recently, and rather than starting off with the departure at running back, let's start with the addition at quarterback, because that was the big news since we last talked to everybody. Last week we talked about Sawyer Robertson. We talked about other options there at quarterback, although he was really the guy that had been kind of red Sharpie circled on the list and was the main priority. He committed. What was it, like a day later, I believe, he made it official. He's been on 365 Sports, various, interviews with the radio show, with you on the website as well. Comes over from Mississippi State, a Lubbock kid, or Lubbock young man, I should say. One of the, last Mike Leach guys, and just a guy with a really good head on his shoulders from when we talked to him a few days ago. Really likable. You can just kind of tell, he's a quarterback. He's a leader. He's got the right outlook on kind of what he's walking into, and he's obviously excited about the opportunity as well. But tell us about Sawyer Robertson, answering the big quarterback question for Baylor. in terms of that question being they needed anybody to just be in the room with Blake Shapen, a scholarship quarterback. So now they've got a second scholarship quarterback. They still need another one, so you can address that as well. But this is a position that, was extremely critical after the Austin Novosad flip on signing day. And so they had to scramble and, a young quarterback with multiple years, a guy that Mike Leach obviously liked, as we mentioned. What do you like about Sawyer Robertson, and how big was this to land him last week?
Yeah, so I guess let's kind of start with why this decision was made. I think the backstory of it is really important, but obviously he went to Mississippi State to be coached by Mike Leach. And Mike Leach was a guy who he admired. Obviously, he lived in Lubbock, so he got to see kind of that golden age during the Mike Leach era and really wanted to be, as he told you on the radio, a quarterback for Mike Leach and be that next Graham Harrell, be that next guy who goes in and puts up these huge numbers and leads a high-powered offense. And I think, during his time at Mississippi State, he felt great about that, right? And obviously Mike Leach passing away played a huge role in his decision to enter the transfer portal, as did the fact that Will Rogers was going to be the starting quarterback for them next year. That's a guy that's thrown for over 10,000 yards during his career. He's got another year that he's coming back for. He's going to be the starter there. So I think Sawyer kind of saw those two things and decided to enter the transfer portal. Now, once he did that, it was very much Baylor, TCU. Those were his first two contacts, first two calls. He wanted to get closer to home, went and visited both of those schools, went to TCU during their prep week for the national championship. He was there, actually got to watch a national championship practice, got to talk to all the staff, has a good relationship with Sonny Dykes, who recruited him out of high school. Also, Sonny Dykes, of course, with that West Texas connection as well. Let me make this very clear. It was a very tough decision for him. He visited Baylor as well, loved his visit at Baylor. Baylor was the favorite when he entered the portal. Based on everything I've reported, they were the favorite. But TCU gave him a lot to think about. I would also say that he didn't know that Garrett Riley was going to leave to Clemson, so probably very happy that he made the decision that he did. But at the end of the day, this was a head-to-head battle with a program that everyone continued to say after they made the national championship was going to win every recruiting battle against Baylor, was going to have all this momentum. Baylor won a huge battle at a position of need. And I'm not even going to sit here and say that Baylor has a better situation in their quarterback room, because Chandler Morris is a very capable quarterback in their room as well and won the starting job over Duggan going into the season. So all this to say, Sean Bell, great job. Dave Aranda, great job. Jeff Grimes, great job. This is key for them after losing Austin Novosad. They had to figure out a way to add another strong arm to the room, a guy who could actually come in and compete. And I actually think in the short term especially, this is a bigger ad than Austin would have been, because I don't think Austin was ready to come in and be the starting quarterback at Baylor this next season, whereas I think Sawyer Robertson comes in much more ready to do that, ready to compete. 6'4", 215. Austin was like 6'3", 180 pounds. There was just going to be an adjustment curve there that you're not going to see with Sawyer. So I think you're seeing a guy that could come in, again, compete immediately. Didn't play a lot at Mississippi State. That's the question mark, right? He hasn't done a ton, doesn't have a lot on film there, but during his time at Lubbock Coronado, threw for over 12,000 yards, threw for over 140 touchdowns, was Gatorade Player of the Year his senior year, was top 150 prospect in the entire country, is the highest ranked recruit Baylor's ever landed at the quarterback position outside of Jarrett Stidham since the rankings have been, kind of into effect. I know they've had some guys back in the past, Odell James, but it's huge. This is a guy that picked Mississippi State over Arizona State, Arkansas, Louisville, Texas, TCU, USC. Chose Mississippi State to go play baseball and football, and now he's coming back to Baylor, and Baylor addressed a major position of need, like you said, and won a huge head-to-head battle for a really good quarterback that I think is going to come in and give Blake Shapen all he can handle during this competition.
So Baylor gets their quarterback, makes good on the Austin Novosad loss, and now we'll get into a little bit further, go looking for a third quarterback before all is said and done, because you're not going to go in the next season with just two guys on scholarship, or at least you'd rather not do that, and you'd avoid that at all costs. But scholarships are tight at the moment. What we do know is there's been a couple of departures Let's start off on the recruiting front first, and then it gets into the man who also coached this guy because they're both gone now at this point. But attrition-wise, we've seen this for the last month. It's like 2 guys leave, 2 guys join, 2 guys leave, 2 guys join, to where we're now at, I think it's 10 new guys and 9 departures, or like 9 and 9. It's pretty even, and I know they're not done adding, and I know they're probably not done subtracting, but correct Squirrel Williams putting out a graphic last week, just a few days ago, a matter of fact, kind of towards the end of the week, announcing that he was, in fact, going to enter the transfer portal. This led to a bunch of people going like, wait, what? Because Squirrel is a fan favorite. If he was not beloved, then I don't think people would have batted an eye, but the fact that he is why people are like, what's going on? Even though they're all well aware, because anybody who's followed Baylor football for the last 4 years is well aware, he's had a very spotty injury history that's prevented him from being all that he could probably be. And that's been unfortunate because it's clear when he is healthy that he's a fantastic player. I mean, he's sensational with the ball in his hands at full health, but we just saw it so rarely, you know? And even the games where he was healthy, he still wasn't really healthy because they'd use him like 50% of what you'd probably use a guy in that situation. So we just could never really fully wrap our arms around Squirrel, the player, as much as we probably wanted to. But no doubt that he was a guy that people loved and will be cheering for, and that are fingers crossed hoping does not play in the Big 12, because we've just had way too much crossover over the last year or so. But he's going to find a landing spot. It's unfortunate that he's not going to finish his career out in green and gold. On track, I think, to get his degree. Hasn't graduated yet, though. But, should walk away with his Baylor degree. So that
Hopefully.
You would hope so. But, that is, still in the works. And, I don't think that anybody's going to begrudge him for his decision, especially when it sounds like he was kind of like a little, hey, might want to look elsewhere, or mutual. I don't know how you want to break it down there, because I'm just kind of trying to read the tea leaves a little bit. It seemed, based on his father's tweet, like they weren't expecting it. But you knew something had to happen in the running back room because there's just a lot of numbers there right now. So your thoughts, Squirrel Williams into the transfer portal, and, that's, I believe, 9 or 10 guys now as far as exits go.
Yeah, I personally think it's more of a situation where they wanted Squirrel back and they didn't have the room to bring him back. That's kind of where I lie. Now, I know there's been tweets suggesting that this was just like, you're left out in the cold, like you know what I mean? That's kind of how that tweet sounded, to be frank.
But, his father's?
Yeah, just like,
it came across as just like shocked.
Like lied to almost.
I don't even know about that. I just read it as like they were shocked by it. They were not expecting to be told, like, we don't have room for you. And I don't know, it didn't come across to me as like real negative, but surprised, yes. And maybe I need to reread it, but I didn't. It wasn't like overly negative, like I can't believe they betrayed us type of a thing. It wasn't that. It was just a surprise, like I said.
Yeah. It was interesting, right? The timing of it all. So I think that it, to me, based on reading the situation, they have a bunch of running backs in their room. They went out, got Dominic Richardson. So they added another guy to the room, and to be honest with you, they added a guy that more so fits kind of what they need for next season. And so if you look at their depth charts, like Richard Reese is probably the best running back on their roster. You had Dominic Richardson, who is more of like a power back, move the chains, great complement to Richard Reese type. Then they also have Quaylon Jones, who had a very productive season this past year and showed his worth as far as pass blocking, receiving, just well-rounded. So to have a fourth running back, I think, is really hard to justify when you have so many other needs on the roster. Squirrel was going to be a super senior. Now, we can debate how many years of eligibility he has left, because it might be a lot more than we think just because of all the medical stuff. But I just want to say, just kind of my thought process on it, like, I love Squirrel as a player. I love Squirrel as a person. Like, I've never seen or heard anything but great things from Squirrel, and I hope he goes and kills it wherever he goes, because during his time at Baylor, I'm sure it's been really frustrating. I know it's been frustrating for him, and I know it's been frustrating for fans, just the simple fact that you see a guy with this much talent and just has not consistently been healthy throughout his career. So I wish him well. Unfortunate situation, a guy who, I think Baylor would have loved to have back. It just didn't quite work out for both sides.
That leads us to another departure, Justin Johnson, running backs coach. This was a little bit out of nowhere as well, and all a result of Oklahoma making a hire from Texas Tech staff. They grabbed Emmett Jones to, join their offensive coaching staff, and obviously we're very familiar with Oklahoma and Jeff Lebby and what they do, but they had an opening all of a sudden, and they go looking to Lubbock to grab Emmett Jones, and as a result, Joey McGuire, who's very familiar with what goes on in Waco and the staff here, he all of a sudden goes looking, and I know it didn't take him long to know where he wanted to go because it was a guy that he wanted to get last year. And fortunately for Baylor, they were able to hold on to him at the time just because there was a lot of moving parts and whatnot. But Justin Juice Johnson now joining the Texas Tech staff, leaving as Baylor running backs coach to go become the – gosh, how many titles does he have? He's the passing game coordinator, he's the wide receivers coach, and he's the assistant head coach.
Yes.
So he added some titles, at least 2, and I'm sure got a little pay bump as well, but that's not what eventually tilted him. I mean, this was something that Joey had been, trying to make happen for about a year since he took over the job last season, and Juice goes ahead and makes the move. And so now Baylor is on the search for a running backs coach, and you had the Squirrel Williams news kind of coinciding with that. And so it's just sort of interesting that, all of a sudden, hey, is Squirrel leaving because Juice is Squirrel going to Tech? I saw some of that out there. I don't think that they're all that related. I think it's just, kind of the way things broke. But your thoughts on Justin Johnson heading off to Texas Tech, recruiting-wise, just perception-wise, kind of how do you view that move, that loss, and now what Baylor goes and does from here at the running back spot?
Yeah, Juice is awesome. He's a great coach, a guy who's done great things for Baylor as the running backs coach. What he did, and I know a lot of it is also offensive line. Like, it's an entire offense. I understand that. But, what he did with Abram and Treston Ebner in 2021 and then this past year in 2022, even though the year wasn't great, they still ran the ball very effectively. And even with the running backs having all those injuries, having to start a true freshman, going with Quaylon Jones, who really hadn't played a lot of meaningful snaps in his career, and being able to get a lot out of him, I was very impressed by what I saw from Juice this year as an on-the-field coach. And again, I think this is a very good hire by Tech. I'm curious, the passing coordinator type thing. I know he was an all-conference wide receiver, so I don't think that that's going to be a tough adjustment for him. But it is interesting to see that shift just because we've seen him as the running backs coach at Baylor. So curious to see how he does. I'm sure he's going to do great. Very good coach, like I mentioned. On the recruiting side of things, also very good there. And a guy that was very reliable, relating to players, talking to players, getting guys to visit Baylor, getting guys to have a lot of interest in Baylor. That's a big reason why Joey McGuire brought him there, is because of that recruiting acumen and that resume. And so, yeah, this is a tough loss. Baylor's going to have to figure out a way to go hire someone who can come in and fill that void as a recruiter and, of course, as a coach. Smart hire by Tech, very good hire by Tech, and Baylor's now just going to have to respond and find a guy that can come in and step in for him. But I'm also not going to sugarcoat this and say that this was something that Baylor was fine with happening. Like, They weren't. They wanted him to come back. They wanted him to continue to be on staff because they valued what he brought to the table.
Yeah, no, it's a loss. It's somebody that they wanted to keep around, like you said, but it's somebody that Texas Tech really wanted badly. I totally get it. Dave Aranda goes to the LSU well and has a few times, so that's what you do. I just hate it from the Baylor. Like, it's great for Tech, but I wish there was less crossover at this point. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I would really enjoy talking about them a lot more if there wasn't, like, the constant crossover it feels like. And I totally get why. Like, don't get me wrong. But now it's like, when I view it, it's like, okay, so they just grabbed a guy who's been here this entire offseason, knows all of the recruiting ins and outs, knows the offseason plans. Like, you know what I mean? And so that's going to benefit an enemy. And that's, that's something that's just part of the deal. It's part of the gig. They could very well go and hire a Tech coach for, all we know. But it's just like, man, you just went through this whole last month of the offseason, and all that information and all that's just going out to the team that's going to play you again next year. And that's just, the way it is in college football. But, Yeah, I just wish there was a little bit less crossover. But,
yeah,
but that's a good get for Texas Tech.
Yeah, and this was tough for Baylor because they just simply didn't have all these openings to go out and add all these titles, I don't think. And so, Tech offered him a very good opportunity. He took it. I also don't think that I think if everything was equal, I don't think Juice would have left. I think I don't think things were equal. You know what I mean? As far as what Baylor could offer versus Tech. And so that's kind of where things lie there. Again, tough loss. Is Juice irreplaceable? There's no way they can figure out a way to replace him and find someone who can do as good of a job? No. Baylor can do that. Baylor can find someone who can come in, fit what they're trying to build. But like you said, very good hire by Tech for sure, a guy that Baylor would have liked to have kept.
Meanwhile, in addition, or I guess not an addition so much as somebody deciding to stay, as all these personnel moves, whether it be coaching staff or players, in the portal, or whether it be commitments, just straight up high school recruiting, but also decisions, guys making the decision to stay or go. As we mentioned, Squirrel Williams, that's a portal story because he's now in that and exploring all of his options, and wouldn't surprise me at all to see him in Lubbock. That would just be very fitting.
I would hate to see that.
I mean,
and so would Baylor fans.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, God, the last thing you want to see, but it's like you almost expect it, but I don't know what their situation is. So regardless, I just hope he lands in a good spot. But it would be kind of nice to just be able to watch him and not have to worry about like seeing him show up at McLean Stadium next year.
Go to Nebraska.
Yeah, go please. Just go to Nebraska so we can all enjoy you still. But no, in all seriousness, he made the decision to go. We've already described the situation there, but one player who made the decision to stay, a big one on the defensive line, is TJ Franklin, Temple High School alum, just down the road. Arrived at Baylor 4 years ago, started playing right away as a true freshman, and he is coming back for a 5th year. So the defensive line won't be totally depleted when it suits up next season, and there's still a decision or two to be made on, a couple of other guys, like what happens with Gabe Hall, like what are we going to see as far as that goes. But TJ Franklin, you could very well have written him off as, going ahead and moving on, but pretty big news that he's staying for a 5th year.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, to have someone that has, provides the stability that he does to the defensive line is huge. And he had a very nice year this year. I don't think to the level that he would have wanted, but that went for the whole defense, right? He had 35 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 3 for loss. But during his career, 8 sacks, 18 tackles for loss. This is a guy who I expect to come out next year and have a very, very impactful season. And like you said, it's huge that he comes back because Baylor doesn't have a ton of depth up front. I would also say the fact that they haven't really gone out and tried to recruit a ton of defensive linemen from the portal, I think is pretty telling of how they feel about the situation going into spring ball. They added Jarrell Boykins, who's a JUCO kid that will play nose tackle. But outside of that, they haven't really addressed any area of need, which makes me think that, obviously getting TJ Franklin back is huge, but it also makes me think that maybe Gabe Hall is coming back as well, just because of the simple fact that if he was leaving, I mean, what are you going to do to address the defensive line? Like, they don't have a lot of bodies, and they're all very young. So just something that I've kind of been thinking on there as well. But getting TJ back gives them stability there, gives them someone up front who they can absolutely rely on, gives them a veteran, gives them a leader in the locker room. I mean, all of these things are massive for this Baylor program. You can't even find a transfer that's like TJ Franklin. That's how big this is.
Yeah, it's huge to have him back with all of his experience. Not a guy that you have to, like some of these young guys, get in there and get him in the weight room. Like, he's already been through that whole process. He's a grizzled guy at this point. So they need some of that. They need some of the leadership aspect too. And so I think that's a really big get that you weren't necessarily just banking on having when the season ended. I mean, you thought there was a possibility, but it was by no means a sure thing. So to get that news and to have it official, especially when there's so many parts coming and going, I think that's a big one for this defense next year. And for Matt Pallage, obviously, being a new defensive coordinator, that's a key piece for him.
And again, like, if you knew he was gone, then they would have had to address the transfer portal massively. Like, we're talking about the guys on their roster right now that are, you got Jarrell Boykins, who's a nose tackle. Then you have Trey Wilson, who's an incoming freshman. Devontae Tazzino, a redshirt freshman. Trey Emery, a redshirt freshman. That is all you have on the defensive line outside of TJ Franklin and Gabe Hall. Like, they're just is simply they would have had to go out and really pursue guys if they were going to need to replace him. So gladly they don't have to. They're going to get him back. They're going to get a chance to develop their young guys, and then hopefully when TJ does leave next year, they'll have a lot of replacements for them. But yeah, getting him back makes me feel a whole lot better about their defensive front.
So here in a couple weeks, maybe there'll be a podcast that only goes like a half hour because there's a lack of news. But my gosh, it's been a very busy last month or so. So just in the last few days, you got Juice Johnson leaving for Texas Tech. You've got TJ Franklin deciding to come back. Squirrel Williams enters the transfer portal. Sawyer Robertson commits and gets them their big quarterback commit. I mean, that's all been in the last 6-7 days.
Their enrollees arrive.
Which I'm about to get to.
Yeah,
but, I mean, that's, personnel-wise, a lot of moving parts. So now on the hunt for a running backs coach. I don't know, scuttlebutt on the board seems to indicate that might not be too long of a wait, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that trending the way? Are we looking Pac-12 guy, or is there a name out there that seems like a surefire thing at this point? I know that one of the rumors was the Oregon State running backs coach. I saw him on like a tweet, and then I think there's some scuttlebutt about him on the board. Seen a couple of other names. Is there anybody, though, that you'd say, like, yeah, pay attention to this guy or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple. I think, I've seen the rumors of the Pac-12 as well. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on too. And I really liked Joe Price at UTSA as well. He was
that was another name. Yeah.
But yeah, those are a couple guys that I would keep an eye on. The Baylor staff, though, I think is looking to address this rather quickly. Like, I can't imagine this lingering much longer. So we should know a name here in the near future. But yeah, I think they're going to address it pretty quick, and they need to. Because he's got to come in and meet all these guys, get used to the program, understand, Jeff Grimes' scheme going into the spring. This is an important hire and one that, again, like you don't want to string along too far.
Yep, so should be getting word on that probably before the end of the week, I would think.
Guess, yeah.
And it's only Tuesday, so there's still plenty of time with that. But, yeah, just threw a couple of names out there, but there's, other ways they could end up going. So we'll see on that front. And, that's a room, too. They need to figure out what's going on with Tamek Williams. Is he going to be a part of the mix or not after missing pretty much the entire season with a concussion suffered in the BYU game in week number 2? We've heard no updates on him whatsoever. And so now you have the Squirrel Williams piece, and you just wonder, okay, who's going to be in that room? Is Tamek Williams, in fact, going to still be a part of the group or not? So I think that's, not so much the running backs coach is going to come in and answer that question, but as far as that room goes, that's what I'm now most curious about outside of that hire is, okay, now what can we know about Tamek Williams? And that will help answer some other questions as well. All right, so, in terms of what you just mentioned a second ago, and this also applies to running backs because one of these guys is a running back and will be a part of the mix probably from the very get-go, you would think. The early enrollees, guys starting to arrive on campus. This is members of the 2023 class, but you're also having transfers, starting to make their way in as well. So
they're there.
When you combine the transfers and you combine the early enrollees from the 2023 class, you're looking at, 20 guys when all is said and done. And I'm going to list off who you have checked off as early enrollees, and let me know if they're on campus now, all right?
Yeah.
So running back, Bryson Washington.
Yep.
Tight end, Matthew Kloffenstein. Signed. Wide receiver, Micah Gifford.
Yep.
Defensive end, Trey Wilson. Carl Williams IV, cornerback out of Baton Rouge. Let's see here. Wes Tucker, offensive lineman out of Argyle. Tight end, Hawkins Polly out of H-Town. Punter, Palmer Williams out of North Kakalaka, and defensive tackle Jarrell Boykins.
Yes, and one more, Caden Jenkins, the cornerback out of Louisville as well. He was kind of one of the later guys who I found out was early enrolling. So he's another one. I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe he took the spot of Calvin Clements, who was going to early enroll. And I think
went to Kansas, right?
Right. So he flipped Kansas. So I think they ended up having room for like 10 or 11. They ended up taking 10 in the early enrollee part. Obviously, it's not just they took 10. It's guys who are able to graduate early. That's a huge part of this as well. So, yeah, I mean, 10 guys in the class early enrolling, that's a big
Those are all confirmed on campus.
Yeah,
okay,
I believe so, yeah.
So 10 guys out of the 9 out of the high school ranks, and then Boykins out of the JUCO ranks. And then you've got, okay,
all the
transfers, are they all on
there?
board?
Yeah.
So you're talking
18, I believe, or 19.
Well, let's see here. I got my fancy list I've been putting together in the Numbers app. So Sawyer Robertson.
Yeah.
Is he already on campus?
I think so, yeah. I think he already moved in because classes start today.
Yeah.
So
I just don't know how all that works at this point.
Yeah, I think they all moved in this weekend. Every single, I think everyone you're going to list.
Well, I'll just go over them here. Sawyer Robertson, Campbell and Clark Barrington, the offensive line brothers from BYU. Ketron Jackson, wide receiver, Arkansas. Oak State running back, Dominic Richardson. North Texas tight end, Jake Roberts. Miami defensive back, Isaiah Dunson. Liberty linebacker, Mike Smith. Michigan State kicker, Jack Stone. And that's it as far as the names go. So the 9 guys.
So 19 total guys enrolled over the weekend?
I think so, yeah. That's a pretty big turnover. Pretty big turnover.
It is. Yep, and there'll be more coming through the portal potentially going into fall camp. And then, of course, all the guys who arrive in the summer, all the recruits as well there. So, lots of roster additions.
Yes, there is. So, around 20 new faces, from the portal and the recruiting ranks. And that, I have found it funny that people who were anti-portal like a year ago have suddenly been like, this is kind of awesome because Baylor's so active. Like if Baylor had added like 4 guys, I don't know how awesome people would think it was just because it would probably be, like very sporadic feeling. But the fact that it's like 2 guys a week for the last month, I think has people going, it's pretty sweet, man. Like we'll see how it all works out in the long run because – I guess my one concern is, but, you look at a team like TCU and you saw how they flipped their roster in a lot of places last year. In Oklahoma, they're flipping like 30 different names on their roster. But it does beg the question of like, how much is too much in terms of change, especially when you're talking 20 different people from what your roster looked like a year ago. Is that of any concern to you at all?
No, because we just saw TCU do it and it worked out really well. I think you don't want to build your whole program off the transfer portal, but if you can find ways to find guys who fit your program, fit what you're trying to do, maybe help you get older, then I don't see any reason why it would be, a downgrade or any downside to it at all, because you're still getting guys with eligibility or guys who are going to come in and contribute immediately. So this year they had to do it. They saw how they played this year, saw the areas they need to get better, went out, addressed those needs very aggressively. And I personally think that they should have done it last year as well, going into this year. There were areas they could have improved the roster, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, with that Big 12 title team 2 years ago, they didn't need a lot, and they only went out and got like 4 guys, but they hit a grand slam with every single one of them.
Yeah.
Like even Drew Estrada was not super impactful statistically, but when he caught balls or when he had a return, like it was impactful, like it mattered, or his blocking mattered, and they didn't have to go and get a bunch because they had such a senior-laden group, and they ended up winning, a couple championships as a result of that. And then last year, given how much experience they lost, probably should have hit that way harder.
Right.
Probably should have hit it way harder.
They should have. And we have one comment in the YouTube chat that I just saw, just asking me a question about because I said that there could be more coming in for fall camp in the summer. And I do think that there could be more additions going into summer as Baylor maybe loses guys after spring camp. Once guys figure out what the depth chart looks like, figures out, who's going to start, who's going to play a big role, then you'll have more guys transfer, more opportunities to go out and add guys. So it does not mean that there won't be more spring additions, though. That was another question he had. I still think that they're going – right now I still think that Tristan Gebbia is going to be Baylor's 3rd quarterback going into the season. I still think that's going to happen. It's just taking a little bit more time than I thought. And I'm still puzzled by the fact that they haven't taken a cornerback, but that might be one that they wait to address till the summer. We'll see, I guess, on that.
Yeah, I guess one other name that I forgot to mention, and I can't even place exactly, but Noah Rauschenberg, obviously in the portal as well. I forgot to mention him. I know he's already started visiting, and that was a little bit of a surprise. A guy who, was a touchback king and was very reliable in that regard, and that was nice to see the last couple years. That really was, I think, a weapon for them. But he did go in the portal, and, basically the explanation is scholarships, right? You've got so many tied up in special teams that you've got a bunch of guys who are in their 5th years, and you want to kind of hey, we can go get a couple more defensive backs versus having 4 scholarship special teamers.
Well, and Noah, unfortunately, never really got consistent kicking field goals. So he was literally
he
just
was a one-man
kickoff guy.
Yeah, one kickoff guy.
Hard to use a scholarship on that, especially when they were able to go out and get Jack Stone, who is a walk-on at Baylor, but he was offered he got a full ride at Michigan State. So he is a scholarship kicker that they're getting as a walk-on, who I think is going to come in, be the kickoff guy, and also potentially contribute as the field goal kicker as well. So, it's tough losing Noah. He's been so impactful for them in the kickoff game, but I think Jack Stone could come in and potentially be more impactful because of the other things that he can do.
All right, so a lot of information to process. A couple guys into the portal, Squirrel Williams and Noah Rauschenberg. Bunch of guys coming out of the portal to early enroll, along with, basically half of the 2023 recruiting class. So around 20 new faces onboarding over the last few days and getting acclimated to life at Baylor and getting, the spring semester started up. Running backs coach, they're looking, and Juice Johnson is now in Lubbock. And what else football-wise? Anything else that we did not touch on?
No, the enrollees, obviously, that's a big one. But outside of that, it's pretty much just they got the guys on campus. They're ready to go. Spring football should be gearing up, at the end of March, and we're just kind of getting ready for that. I mean, that's where we're at right now. There might be a couple more additions, like we mentioned, going into the spring. But outside of that, it's just get ready for spring football.
All right, so let's turn our attention to hoops for a few minutes here, and then we'll get into the mailbag to close this on out. And we got a bunch of questions to sort through. Might have to chop some of them just based on time here, but we'll see how it goes. So first, starting off with the Baylor men. They're in action tonight. Big game against Texas Tech as they come off of a 2-0 week, and that was much needed given the way that they had started off conference play at 0-3 and dug themselves a little bit of a hole. Really could not afford to be 1-4, much less 0-5, but they go out and beat West Virginia in Morgantown and then get a win over Oklahoma State at home quite comfortably, despite electrical issues at the Farrell Center, creating a blackout and messing with the broadcast and all of that hijinks. But they got the win. Didn't have to break too much of a sweat against the Pokes. So that was a nice way to close out the week. But they're heading to Lubbock tonight. And I know Texas Tech's been struggling a little bit, but they've got IMAC back now, and that's obviously a big boost for them. So your thoughts on the 2-0 week, how needed that was, but now what your expectations are against the Red Raiders. And mind you, they'll also then turn around and go to Norman later this week and take on the Sooners. So it's a road trip week for Scott Drew and the Baylor men.
Yeah, and I felt like that West Virginia game was kind of get the monkey off your back type of game because you were 0-3. Things could have snowballed really quickly. You had to find a way to get right, and it was very close, that game. The free throws, by the way, if you watch that game, the free throws were just the foul calls. It was such a slow game.
What was it, 53 fouls, I think it was?
Brutal.
Is that right,
to watch.
53? Yeah.
Yeah, it was so brutal to watch. Baylor got out of there, got out of Morgantown, got a win. That was huge. Played one of their best games of the entire season against Oklahoma State, really. Outside of that run, Oklahoma State went on to get back in it after the 13-0 start. Baylor really played well in that game, and I think it's showing signs of a team that's trending in the right direction. I know things have been mentioned about, LJ Cryer when he missed some practice time and missed a game. Adam Flagler missed a game early in the season. I still think this is a team that's working on cohesion and working on getting all the parts to really fit. And I think this is a big stretch right here because you're playing a Texas Tech team that's 0-5 in Big 12 play. You're facing an Oklahoma team that's just 2-3 in Big 12 play, both on the road. Both are opportunities for them to make up for the losses that they have at home. And these are two really important games. Baylor needs to find a way to at least win one, but I really think they should be able to win both heading into that huge Kansas game on Big Monday next week.
Yeah, it's a big week. Texas Tech, Oklahoma on the road, and then Kansas next Monday, as you mentioned, on the on the ESPN platform for Big Monday. So these next 3 games, and then you have the SEC Challenge where you're going to face Arkansas.
Yeah.
So, these next couple weeks will – but, I mean, then again, I could probably fast forward and just look at another couple weeks and go, they've got to play this team and that team. That's just Big 12 basketball for you.
Yeah, it's important right now, though, because they're 2-3, So if you're able to get these 2 and then maybe upset Kansas, now you've kind of flipped the Big 12 standings a little bit. If you're able to do that, which is much easier said than done.
Yep, and they'll play Texas Tech twice. They'll get both their matchups in over, the next 3 weeks. They'll have both of those home and away games. So Red Raiders tonight, that should be a really big one for Scott Drew and company. And meanwhile, while they're kind of starting to surge, or at least feeling much better about things after the 2-0 week, the Baylor women are going the exact opposite direction. They looked at one point about 2 weeks ago as though they were going to fall out of the top 25, and they managed to go grab a couple of wins and, keep their spot secured. But then they turn around and lose both of their contests last week, and now for the first time in a long time, they are no longer ranked in the top 25 as a streak was broken, and I was trying to find the tweet, but it was the first time since 2005, I believe.
4.
Yep. Oh, well, add another year then. Yeah, since 2004. So that was a long time ago. That was a really long time ago. That was a much different version of me back in 2004, let me tell you. But, yeah, losses to Oklahoma State and to West Virginia. The Oklahoma State game was at home last Wednesday. You had an opportunity there, let it slip. You lose by 5, and then go to Morgantown and can't take that one either. Garrett, you follow this team on a regular basis and write about the Bears for the website. How would you best summarize last week and kind of where this team is right now?
I would say when you look at this team, there's really a concern about your bench. You're not getting enough production off the bench. I know you've had Kendra Gillespie was not available. She was dealing with some personal issues. Jana wasn't available as well, but she's starting to get her legs back under. But that's really kind of where this lies. You're relying too much on Sarah Andrews to carry the load. While she's been putting up terrific numbers, it's the struggle around her to get the support. Their shot selection has been sketchy at times. I think they rely too much on the 3, especially when it's not falling. But I have been impressed with Dariana Littlepage-Buggs. I think her and Sarah Andrews have been the most consistent people that you can rely on and say night in, night out, we're going to get 110% from those 2. I would like to see Jaden Owens find a way to get more productive in scoring. She does a tremendous job. I mean, look, she is a true point guard. Facilitating the ball, she does excellent, but she's got to find a way to get more involved in the offense. And as far as your bigs, you're still dealing with Asia, who hasn't been available. I think she scored 2 points in this last outing at West Virginia, so that's got to be a positive sign.
Yeah.
But Caitlin Bickle has really kind of carried the load there. But at times, you're getting into a point where with only relying on 1 to 2 bigs, it's getting you in foul trouble, and it's coming back to bite you in the end. So, to me, you've got to find a way to shore up the scoring off the bench in order to really kind of set the tone and make a push towards the postseason.
Yeah, good to see Asia Blackwell start to work her way back. But, that's something that this year's kind of been like, well, we thought we were going to have so-and-so, or we thought we were going to be this, and it's like, but you aren't, and you won't be. And so you've got to figure out a way around that. And the shots last week were not falling, and that was particularly brutal when you can't hit from 3. This team's, I mean, if they can't hit from 3, then you're basically careening towards a loss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the good news is you get to play Kansas State this week, and Kansas State's 1-4 in Big 12 play, 12-6. So you get them at home, that has to be a win. I mean, just has to be. Baylor's got to rebound here because then you get Texas also at home, and Texas
they're starting to play
good.
well.
Yeah, they're 13-5, 4-1 in Big 12 play. So an opportunity here for Baylor to get a win they need to have, and then potentially beat Texas, and then again flip the standings. Because if you win both of those, you're probably going to be sitting right at the top of the conference.
Yeah, it's just very unfamiliar territory, and I know this has led to. It's really been. It's kind of not a very fun year when in every single sport, when things start going south, portions of the fan base start pointing at another coach in the Big 12.
Yeah.
In football, in men's basketball, like what is it, a week ago? Like you have a couple struggles. Oh, Jerome Tang in football. Joey McGuire.
Yep.
And we know what the deal is in women's basketball. You know what the LSU Tigers are doing right now. And hey, I mean that's part of decisions. I mean, not that Tang or McGuire were. Well, I guess McGuire was because you could have hired him as head coach. But that's something that Matt Groves, when Kim Mulkey decided to return home to Louisiana, however that situation, ultimately in the end ended up where it ended up. I mean, she decides to go home, and, if you want to argue about it beyond that, by all means, but that's kind of where both sides just let it lay, and she's doing well, and that's not at all a surprise, but it's just a double whammy when you are not doing well, and then it's like, but look over there, and it's just weird that it's all kind of culminated in, like, every sport you look at now, you're like, but what about that person over there? It's like, yeah, okay, we get it, but for women's basketball, not great timing because the Tigers are playing well, but that's to be expected.
Yeah, they're 18-0. So
yeah,
they're on a run, and Baylor has had, again, I think everyone's going to make a bigger deal out of it just because of the way the season has gone so far, but Baylor's missing arguably what were going to be their two best players this year. Mm-hmm. So I think people need to remember that and put that in perspective, and it was something that was unexpected. And maybe getting Asia Blackwell, maybe she'll come back and get fully healthy towards the end of the season. But not having Dre is a big deal. And you're missing two players that were expected to be potential all-conference type players. I mean, those are big losses. And so, whatever. It's been bad luck. That's happened to Baylor quite a bit this year, it feels like, in sports. But now I think it's bigger for Nikki Collin to just make sure this team starts trending in the right direction instead of things snowballing, right? That's all you want to see, is that they turn it around a little bit, start playing their best basketball at the end of the year. And if that ends up being, a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament or something like that, that's okay. Because, again, you're missing two of your best players for a large portion of the season, and in Dre Edwards' case, the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, it's notable that they've had those losses, or they've had those, potential impact players or expected impact players not available, but you know how it works. That's not that you're being rational, Grayson.
Right.
That's not how it works when you're talking about some of these things. But no, you're absolutely right. It's just something to be mindful of, though, is when you're talking about since 2004. Mm-hmm. That's a long time ago. And so very curious to see how they respond, and they have an opportunity to do so. A lot of Big 12 games left. But, man, we are just rolling right through the season at the same time. So glad to see Asia Blackwell back. That was huge, and hopefully they can work her in and she can stay healthy, and that would be fantastic. And maybe, before all is said and done, they'll get a little bit of luck breaking their way, because they sure have hit on the bad luck side of things, it seems like, far more often than they have on the opposite. So women's basketball out of the top 25, but we'll see, like I mentioned, what they do here. And Garrett, check out his work over on Sikkim365.com as he covers the Bears on a regular basis with game recaps and all of that. But they'll have Kansas State in Waco tomorrow night, on Wednesday night, and then Texas on Sunday at the Farrell Center as well. So a big week with 2 home games before heading to Lubbock. The following week, they'll have a little bit of a break after the 2 home games, and then get to catch their breath a little bit. So to go like 2-0 would be awesome. Get a few days off and then go head back out on the road. That would be the ideal scenario there. So we will see on that. But can't wait for the men tonight in Lubbock. That ought to be a terrific game. All right, anything else before we get into the mailbag here?
No, let's do it.
All right, Scotty B, what percentage do you give Baylor men's basketball against KU on Monday? Just fast forwarding here.
Right, so KU's got a very, very big and intriguing week coming up here, because they got at Kansas State, which I believe is tonight, and then they play TCU later on this week before playing Baylor. I'll say this. If Kansas wins those 2 games, I'm going to give Baylor a 80% chance to beat them. Like, if they're undefeated going into that game, I think Baylor's going to beat them. I think irregardless, though, if they do have a loss, I'm going to put it at 70%. I think that's a game Baylor's going to win. Does that mean Baylor's better than Kansas? No. But I think in the Farrell Center, I think that's going to be a tough game for Kansas to win. So I like the Bears in that one.
Elsewhere, finally, someone from Baylor Athletics got home wins in 2023 over the weekend. Can I get an amen for that, given the first 3 of 2023 were losses prior to Saturday? What?
Yeah.
Who's he talking about? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, Baylor men's basketball.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
They started
I guess so.
2023 with losses. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess, yeah, amen, Scotty. First 23 were prior losses Saturday. I realize most Baylor fans are disappointed in women's basketball, not ranked since 04, or back-to-back losses to unranked teams. But let's not give any knee-jerk reactions that I've seen, like no NCAA tournament or should have kept Kim. Just stay calm and support the team. There are 13 regular season games left, which doesn't include Big 12 tournament. Big 12 has 5 teams with 1 or 2 conference losses with no teams ranked higher than 15th.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about. They've been dealt a tough hand, and that's how you respond. Don't let it snowball. Find a way to continue to find ways to win games. And fans, just support your team. I mean, that at the end of the day, I mean, all the negative energy towards a sport is not helping at all. Like, that's not helping the situation. Now, you can have opinions on it. That's fine. But I would also say realize that Baylor women's basketball has been playing without 2 of their best players who are expected to be huge contributors this year.
Best week ever. Squirrel healthy yet? Just wanted to be the last person to ask. Yeah, I mean, that's
sad time.
That's a sad ending. And most often that question was asked and the answer was no. Pretty much almost every time it felt like, or just didn't know whether or not he would be available on any given week. So, yeah, is Squirrel healthy yet? I sure hope so for his sake, and good luck to him wherever he goes. And like we said earlier, it'd be nice to see him go to like the ACC or something so we could actually, just watch and enjoy him and not see how, like, not have to scout where he fits in as far as, in the Big 12 and returning to McLean for some vengeance or something like that. But, yeah, definitely wish him the best and hope he can find that elusive piece of health. Master Pierce, MPH, can you list the top 3 recruiters on this football staff regardless of the side of the ball?
Yeah, so I guess we're just going with on-the-field coaches here. Eric Mateos is definitely one. He's been elite recruiting the offensive line. I would say Caleb Collins is kind of a young name that's been doing a really nice job at the jack position, outside linebackers. He's been recruiting kind of all over. He's been helping in different areas, but I think he's done a very nice job recruiting. The third one, I'd probably go with Dennis Johnson. He's a guy that's mentioned a lot, that's been recruiting at a high level. Sean Bell, Dallas Baker, they're good recruiters as well. But those first 3 that I named have really done a nice job, and those are 3 of the names that I would say come up the most when I'm talking to recruits. Now, it's a little bit tougher because Mateos, it's only the offensive line guys. But in general, that's kind of how I view it. This is a good staff. I know they don't get a ton of credit because they don't have a top, 15 recruiting class like some people want. But they've done a nice job, and what they did through the transfer portal has been huge as well. And it's been very encouraging to see. And to see Sean Bell bounce back after, that kind of crazy situation with Austin Novosad and going out and landing Sawyer Robertson over TCU definitely has been massive for him.
Ryan Allen Longs, with all the new Baylor players moving to Waco this week, I wanted to ask the important question: what local restaurant would you take them to first, and why?
I know no one's going to like this, but I love George's, so that's where I would be going.
Shocker.
I know, not the crazy take. I'm not
Jacob
landing.
Pointon.
I'm not
he's
landing, one of those places that nobody, I guess, outside of Waco's heard of, but I love George's. That place is classic.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, you can't really go wrong there. It's pretty much like if you want to, go with a safe batting average, go to George's and you'll probably walk out.
You're always going to have a good experience.
Yeah, you walk out with a good experience, so it's a good batting percentage to be sure. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the default answer. But like I've said previously, there's default answers for a reason. I mean, it's the easy answer, but that could also be the right answer as well. And I think most of the time that it typically is when you're talking about Waco recommendations, that's 1A or 1B. I think almost every time there's a reason for that. Papa Bear, do you expect the running back room with a new coach to have more total rushing yards in 23 than 22? What about better running back pass protection and options for pass catching?
Ooh, good question. I think that they will have around the same total rushing yards as they did this past year. They were pretty good this year. They weren't as good as they were in 2021, but I think they can be as good. Now, pass protection, I think they're going to be better because Dominic Richardson gives them another option there as a pass protector alongside Quaylon Jones. Pass catching, I think maybe they'll be a little bit better because I could see Richard Reese taking a big step in the right direction in that department as well. So, yeah, I think in general they're going to be better than they were a season ago. Now, a lot of that may come down to health. A lot of that may come down to just the personnel that they have in the room. But I do think like Dominic Richardson will be very nice for them. A second year for Richard Reese will be very good. Quaylon Jones continuing to develop. I think it's a very good room.
Yeah, I think, I don't know about like the more yardage and all of that. I would suspect that they could, but I think they'll be able to, hopefully be able to throw the ball a little bit better, more consistently. But yeah, I could see that. Don't have any reason to rule that out. Quaylon being back in another year should help in some of the latter areas that you mentioned as well. So, yeah, I think there's reason for optimism there. Flomo Mike, going back to 2019, what percentage of each class sees meaningful snaps in their career? Do you think the 23 class beats the average? Thank you for doing this podcast every week. Well, thank you, Mike, for the question.
I did not go through the percentage of each class that plays meaningful snaps.
How dare you?
I did not do that. That is just I think that's one of those where you just look at the class and you go, were they good or were they not?
That's the next on three calculation.
Yeah, percentage of class that plays meaningful snaps.
Yeah.
It's just hard to really gauge that. 2023 class, though, as far as kind of in relation to the others, this is a really good class. And this is a class that I feel like will be better than probably all the classes they've had in recent seasons. I think they're going to be really good. They're strong on the offensive line. They address some areas of need on the defensive line especially. They really attack that position. So I think this will be a really good class. I think their percentage will be higher than that of the other classes in recent seasons. Also, Baylor did hire their running backs coach.
Yeah, I just got that.
You saw it? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Craig.
Baylor football has hired their running backs coach. Oregon State's A.J. Stewart is heading to Waco to replace Justin Johnson. Let's see here. A.J. Stewart looks like it's, unofficially official.
Yeah.
But making the move from Corvallis, also coached, not only the last 2 years with the Beavers, but prior to that, Arizona. Had a couple years at BYU, because there's always that crossover. I was talking about like the Texas Tech Baylor crossover. There's a lot like on the other end of it, like Baylor and BYU crossover. There's been a ton of that. But it was at BYU for a couple years, and also Rice for about 4 seasons prior to that. So from Rice to BYU to Arizona to Oregon State and now to Baylor, A.J. Stewart. The Beavers were 10-3. They've got a good thing going on up there in Corvallis. And I did, as a matter of fact, last night when I saw the rumor pop up about A.J. Stewart, it made me think of B.J. Baylor, who's a Texas guy who graduated after last year. I know that there were other things in play outside of just the hired of A.J. Stewart, but if you look at B.J. Baylor's junior to senior numbers, he goes from like a few hundred yards to like 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns, and I realized he got like 200 more carries.
All Pac-12 first team, too.
Yeah, he got a bunch more carries, so obviously he was either, just getting into the system or was sharing or what have you behind guys 2 years ago. But then last year he was like the guy and was one of the better running backs statistically in the country. And I remember that very well because every week with the Earl Campbell Award, it was like, B.J. Baylor, man, this Texas kid's out there killing it. And now they've got Damian Martinez, who's a good player as well at quarterback up there. But regardless, A.J. Stewart, new running backs coach. You got any immediate thoughts on that?
Well, this is the guy that you were alluding to earlier, and this was kind of the guy who had been trending in Baylor's direction. The key stat that you mentioned on B.J. Baylor, first Oregon State running back to lead the conference in rushing since Steven Jackson. What a name. In 2003, guy who had a great NFL career as well. So just fantastic. He did something that really Oregon State hasn't done a lot by developing B.J. Baylor like that. And he's done a really nice job during his career. He obviously has a relationship with Jeff Grimes. This is a great hire. I think one thing with him that's going to come into play is how well can he recruit. And I don't know that I have a for sure answer to that quite yet, but I think we will get an answer in the near future because in this next class, they're probably only going to take one running back So who's that going to be? Who's he going to target? Because they took 2 in this past class. But he's going to come into a position that's loaded with depth. Now it's about developing that group into an elite group. And so you could see someone like Richard Reese really take a big step in the right direction after a great freshman season, or, whoever. But I think what we've seen from him is that he can develop talent. Now we just need to figure out, can he be a great recruiter as well?
Adam Rittenberg of ESPN also reporting he will be assistant head coach.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So
big
that
news
is
there.
notable.
Okay.
I guess they needed to also give Juice the passing game. I guess that was the tipping point.
Yeah, I guess that's the extra title.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is obviously notable. But Baylor has hired their running backs coach. That's breaking news. A.J. Stewart from Oregon State, and there is some previous crossover there. So, yeah, that's good stuff there. And good to have that finalized and all official. So that pretty much answers that every staff question outside of, like, who's covering special teams basically at this point. And that can all get figured out, obviously, in the next few weeks. But, all right, so we got that breaking news. Welcome aboard, A.J. Stewart, and we'll get to learn a lot more about him as the weeks go along. Let's close out with some questions here. Let's see.
Run James Taylor.
Yeah, James is answering Scotty's question about now that this is not that this is my question, but to go from winning the Big 12 literally every season to where we are is a huge setback, even more so when Kim literally changed the program around, is number 3 in the country and undefeated. Turning a blind eye to that won't make it better. Sorry, no, this is for questions. Right. Ziwatanejo Bear. Will this be the last week of the Bearcast questions? I can't imagine any way to fill out the mailbag without squirrel questions. Well, Ziwatanejo Bear, no, we'll keep moving on along here, but, we will miss the squirrel question, on occasion asking about his health status in, like, mid-March and then mid-June and then, of course, in August. And then really all year round we got squirrel questions. So we'll miss a part of that. James Taylor 1. I love what you guys do. Thanks for being here every week. Well, thank you. All right, we might have to pare some of these down here. It's a lot, but watching Juice leave had me thinking in my time, never seen such staff turnover in college football like we've seen in Aranda. Might be missing someone, but only Sean Bell and Dennis Johnson remain from the original staff. That's not to mention changes from Corey Campbell and a bunch of off-field guys. Does that hyper churn concern you any? Obviously noting that some have been promotions. Well, a bunch of those have been promotions. Like a bunch of those have been promotions. And also I can think of, like, Corey Campbell, they made the move and they won a Big 12 title the following year with Vic Valoria.
Right, they wanted to make that move.
Yeah, like that was a need.
Joe Wickline to Eric Mateos wanted to make that move. Larry Fedora to Jeff Grimes.
But in general, I mean, we can name like 10 of them that needed and were Dave Aranda decisions that were, like obviously that COVID year kind of made every hire initially sort of strange. And Fedora is one that immediately jumps to mind. But so is Campbell. He's now with Rule at Nebraska, so he's fine. He's landed on his feet. But, yeah, I mean, there has been turnover. I'd say it's a combination, though, of just the industry. It's a lot of guys getting promotions, especially out in Lubbock.
Yeah.
And then there's, just wanting guys to leave because you don't think that they're doing their job very well. And there's been a handful of those guys. And then there's guys going from two, like, off-field, like, analyst roles to then getting – better positions as they climb up the ladder. So there's a combination of things at play here, but does the hyper churn, as he calls it, does that concern you at all?
No, it really doesn't. I think most of the moves that Dave Aranda has made, like himself actually deciding we need to move to this from this, have worked out. So I'm curious if it works out in this situation. I think it will. The moves that they've made this offseason going from Ron Roberts to Matthew Pallage, I think that's going to work out really well. We'll see. That's to be decided. But I think right now I'm not concerned because it's the nature of college football, like you mentioned, and also because I simply trust Dave Aranda based on what he's been able to do during his time at Baylor, which is make adjustments when needed. And I think he's done that. And you're going to lose some guys when they get promotions. That's going to happen. But the ones that they decided to move on from, I think they've done a great job replacing those.
Also, love what we did with the portal, especially replacing quarterback room with Robertson after the Novosad debacle. Looking back, we seem to have a hard time landing DBs and receivers in the portal and high school ranks. We seem to be in a ton of guys make top twos, but never seem to really close with a few exceptions. Why do you think that is, and how does that change?
I I think that's a little bit harsh. I mean, the 2023 class was not going to be a huge wide receiver heavy class. Once they got Micah Gifford, they kind of moved on from that position. Then they went out, got Keytron Jackson, who is phenomenal. You'll see that this season, but that's a huge get at the wide receiver position. And then obviously Armani Winfield, yeah, he's one to mention, but so is Jordan Neighbors. Like, keeping Jordan Neighbors in that 2022 class was massive. He's very, very good, a guy who I think is going to be very productive at Baylor. They also went out and got Hal Presley out of the transfer portal as well. So I kind of disagree with that at wide receiver. Defensive back's a little bit different, because I think they've recruited at a pretty high level. They've landed most of the guys they've wanted to land. They even landed Alfonso Allen late in that cycle. But in the portal, they haven't shown the same amount of success. They got Isaiah Dunson, but I think there's more work to be done there. But on the flip side, I think they like the guys in their room. I think that could also be indicative of why they haven't put out a ton of safety offers. I know everyone's down on their safety group, but the fact of the matter is, if they were just ultra concerned with it, they would have put out more offers at that position. So maybe they like what they have in the room, like the guys they've recruited, or at least want to give them a chance to see what they can do during spring football. So I'm not ultra concerned with it quite yet. Now, if they continue, if they go out and miss on a bunch of guys, that could be more problematic. But again, Baylor's not going to go out and get 5-star receivers super easily. Same with 5-star cornerbacks. Those are premium positions that are just simply hard to land a guy like that.
Speaking of DB, seems like the one position we got worse post-portal when you think, all right, seems like that is the one position we got worse at in post-portal when you think we lost Johnson and Walcott and just replaced with the single DB from Miami. How important is it to add another DB before the season starts? Why do you think we didn't fight harder to keep Walcott, for example, for insurance, or find a way to make situations work like when SMU took the LSU transfer?
Yeah, I think, again, it's kind of simplifying it because it might mean that Baylor likes the guys they have in their room. Like, for instance, Al Walcott leaves. Well, maybe they think Alfonso Allen's going to be better than him. And you get Alfonso Allen for 3 seasons instead of Al as a 1-year rental. Essentially, I know he's not a rental because he was on the staff, but Arkansas is getting him on a rental. They get him for 1 season. Lorando Johnson, kind of a different situation. Again, I've mentioned it multiple times. I think they're going to take another cornerback. I just don't see any way they don't. So I think right now, yeah, it might be bad they only have Isaiah Dunson, but I think they're going to go out, find another one at some point, and it'll make that look much, much better. But I guess it's just me reiterating the fact that they didn't recruit safety transfers extremely hard, and for that reason, it makes me think they want to see what they have on campus before they go out and try to find safeties who may not be an upgrade there.
All right, couple more, and we got to get through here. James, do appreciate it. What was the calculus to let Williams go? Talking about Squirrel Williams. I know he's older, was our clear difference maker last year at running back. With Tay potentially retiring and Baylor getting Dominic Richardson, why not find a way to get him on the roster?
I mean, he was the clear difference maker.
Yeah,
I would say Richard Reese was their clear difference maker. I don't agree with that at all. I think that Reese is better than Squirrel, and then you throw into the fact that they got Dominic Richardson, who I think is a different type of running back than what they had on the roster last year. It makes me think that, yeah, it's a loss, but also you don't need 4 running backs on your roster to contribute, in my opinion. It's a tough loss. Everyone's emotional about it. I understand that. But if you really look at it, dive deep into where Baylor was successful, they're not losing their best running back on the roster. They're just simply not, and Squirrel was probably going to be their 3rd option next year alongside Dom Richardson.
Finally, what is your ultimate call on Nikki Collin? Watching LSU turn it around like it has and watching what we have now, it would seem like a clear step back. What is your ultimate prediction on the kind of success she will have? With hindsight being 20/20, do you bite the bullet and keep Kim or go down the route Mac chose?
Go down the route Mac Rhodes chose.
I thought Kim wanted to go back home to Louisiana.
Yeah, well, I trust Mac Rhodes in these situations. He's done a fantastic job with coaching searches and the guys he's brought in. I think Nikki Collin's going to be just fine. Now, will she be as successful as Kim Mulkey? I don't know. Kim Mulkey's a Hall of Fame coach. Like, it's hard to replace someone like that, but I think Nikki Collin will have success with the Baylor women's basketball program. This year, she's just been dealt a really tough hand, in my opinion.
I mean, I would agree it's a clear step back from nearly going undefeated every year. I mean, yeah.
Right.
I don't have an ultimate call on Nikki Collin. I'm reserving to wait for more, which I have the right to do, but because I haven't formed a full final opinion on her at this stage. But yeah, I mean, it's a step back results-wise. I don't know what kind of success she'll ultimately have. I'm just sitting back and watching like everybody else. But no, in hindsight, I don't bite the bullet and keep everything the way that it was. I don't think we're all privy to just what the behind the scenes was like. And if you listen to Kim tell it, then she decided to go back to Louisiana. So, I mean, I'll take her at her word. I know everybody disagrees with that. There's the Camp Kim that thinks that, Mack Rhodes forced her out or that he could have kept her and blah, blah, blah. And, I really don't care to rehash that. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm over it, and I understand that it's going to be a continued storyline, especially when they're undefeated and Collins, dropping out of the top 25. I totally get it, but, in hindsight, I know in the situation that it was, I still think that, yeah, you were basically, in a situation where you made the decision to move on, and I don't slight them for that because there's a line for everybody, ultimately. But she wanted to go back home to Louisiana, and I suppose that they could have changed that, but I don't think anybody's regretting it just yet. We'll see, but I don't think anybody's regretting it, even with the results. So, let that tell you kind of how it is, I guess. But appreciate the question. It is something that is going to be obviously debated for the foreseeable future.
Definitely.
And that's understandable. RG4, which 2023 true freshman could you see playing a significant role in the upcoming season?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the one that I'm kind of looking at is maybe their running back room's so loaded. I really like Sean Tompkins, their offensive lineman out of Georgia. I think he's a guy who could come in and potentially start at right tackle. Maybe. It's going to take time, though, because he's coming in the summer. That makes me have a little pause there. I think Bryson Washington could contribute at the running back position early. That wouldn't shock me at all if he's kind of that third or fourth back. And then finally, probably the guy that probably has the best chance, I would say, just kind of looking at their needs on the roster, is Trey Wilson, the defensive end / outside linebacker prospect out of Lakeview Centennial. He's enrolling early, plays a position of need, kind of already has a thick frame that could play early. So I'll go with him.
All right, call your shot. Who are the next 3 commits in the 24 class? Jaden Porter needs some friends to join the group texts.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think Junior Day could provide some news on that. I think Colton Saraki, the offense lineman out of the Woodlands, it's kind of crazy that he's still uncommitted because it just seems like it's always been trending in Baylor's direction, but he hasn't committed yet. Of course, his brother Caden is on the team, so he's been to Baylor a ton, so he'd be one. Other guys, I think Ridgepoint wide receiver Mason Dossett, he's another one to look at. His dad, of course, played football and ran track at Baylor. Mason has offers from Baylor for both track and for football. I think he could be another one to keep an eye on. And finally, a third one. Let's go with Lumberton. Outside linebacker Brock Jackson. He'd be another one to keep an eye on. Baylor's very high on his list, has been for a while, and he'd be a great one to land. A very good football player, good on the edge, also best friends with Jasper linebacker Ty Anthony Smith, who's one of the best linebacker prospects in the country. So some good news there. Those guys will all be on the Junior Day visit as well coming up January 29th.
Very nice. So just 12 days from the moment we're recording this, and just recruiting never stops, huh? Even
Never.
Dead period with the portal coming up, you think maybe it slows down a little bit, but no, we got Junior Days right around the corner. So, yep, right onto that 2024 class. Let's see here. Scotty B's back. Give Nikki more time. Okay, let's come on, y'all. Please, man. Give Nikki more time. It takes time to get used to a new system, and we had a lot of new faces this year, as well as injury bug and no Dre Edwards. LSU's played one ranked team all year when compared to Baylor's 6. I don't want this fan base to be like Texas, who wants to fire coaches after a bad year with unrealistic expectations in their mind. Thank you, Scotty. ZT Smith 423. Is someone hired outside the current staff to coach special teams, or is that position filled internally, in your opinion?
So I think it's going to be a responsibility that is delegated to one of their position coaches, kind of like it has been over the past few years. But that position coach will also have help with guys on the roster who are kind of quality control types, who have been there managing. Coach Amond is one of them. And I think Brian said that Coach McCarrion is another one. Anyways, my point being, they're going to have help because they got to coach their position. But in general, that position's usually given out to one of the position coaches. So I anticipate that happening.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Pallage, when we talked to him, we asked him about that. He's going to be coaching safeties and D coordinator, so he's just not going to have time on his plate for that.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, that you wouldn't expect. We weren't hiring him for his special teams expertise per se, although he's had success with that. But, yeah, he's coming in to coach defense, and they'll figure it out. But that is an area where they're going to have a lot of turnover, obviously, and they're reworking the scholarships in that room. So think that they'd try to get that back more to its 2021 look than what we saw last year, where it was kind of there's some good things, but it was a little spottier than it was the year prior. Even with the entire room basically coming back, it was kind of strange. All right, here we go again. James Taylor won. Not that this is the thread for this, but I agree. This is about Kim again. I agree I don't want to get someone fired after one bad season, but you can't look at what KM's done the last 2 seasons, look at where we are now, and not say to yourself we got worse. I love support of the program, but NC Nikki Collin had one good season in women's basketball. Her best quality can't be that she is easier to get along with KM. KM's a winner and a proven one. We are no man's land right now. All that dynasty we built could go away and quick. So.
Okay. I mean – listen, Kim did a great job. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that. We understand that. We know Nikki is not – the team's not performing at that level currently. We understand that.
We got it.
Yeah, that's
but she's gone.
Yeah.
She's gone.
Got to move on.
She decided to go to LSU, and that was now over a year ago. It's clear, and it's very easy to say right now, yes, Kim Mulkey's a better coach than Nikki Collin. She's a Hall of Famer. But she's not coming back. She's not here. She's not coming back. And, if it's about Nikki Collin, then like we said a few minutes ago, let's see how it plays out the rest of the year. It's not great right at the moment with them falling out of the top 25, first time in a long time, first time in 20 years, but it is what it is. Like, it's not changing, and she's the coach the rest of the year, so it's best to just throw your support behind her and this team and hope that they can stay healthy and see how they do the rest of the way. And any talk about like this or that or what ifs or whatever, that can wait for more towards the off season, because it's not going to do them any good right now to sit and speculate about the coach that used to be here. That's not going to, really, create any positive energy for them. Not saying you got to be blind and just, root no matter what. I totally get where you're coming from, but it's just, it's not changing. It is what it is. And that's not going to, magically turn back into what it was. It's over. She's at LSU now. Ian Eibel, what freshman transfer are you most excited to watch in the spring?
Freshman, Bryson Washington. Transfer, Sawyer Robertson.
Sawyer Robertson, definitely, with the quarterback situation being what it is. Who'd you say freshman-wise?
Bryson Washington.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
his high school career is unbelievable. I will say Keytron Jackson is kind of right there with Sawyer Robertson as far as a transfer. They really need to hit at wide receiver. They need him to be very good.
Why limit it? There's like 20 people. Let's be excited about all of them.
Let's answer a bunch of them.
There are multiple guys, though. You don't have to really limit it. There's a bunch of guys on either side that are going to be exciting and, really hopefully shake things up in a positive way. For the record, I would rather not lose by 58 in the national championship game. Same here. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? But you got there. That's what I was told. That's all that matters, was that you got there, not that it was the worst bowl loss of all time. I put out a tweet, and it got some reaction. I was like, would you rather have Baylor's season where you won the Big 12 title and Sugar Bowl?
We talked about it last week. Crazy.
And I got a bunch. I got some understandable responses. Then I go, can't believe you asked the question. It's like, okay, dude, I can't believe that. I think it's a legitimate question. Still think it's a legitimate question, as ugly as that was. I understand. I'd side with TCU probably still. But you can't tell me I'm stupid for at least pondering that question when you're losing by 58 and Georgia's ordering chicken wings on the sideline in the third quarter right out of halftime. Trevor Mack, I hear rumors that Texas has a big name ready to add to Sark's staff. Do you have any idea who that might be? Wrong podcast.
Yeah,
unless you're thinking that it's a Baylor guy that could be added. Well, I saw a rumor about Dallas Baker,
Baker's name,
wide receivers coach. Yeah,
but I thought I thought there were rumors about an NFL coach, but I don't know for sure. I don't follow Texas closely enough to know. But I know Dallas Baker's name was mentioned.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that, but I don't know if there's anything more than other than being mentioned, because it was, even the one I saw was like him and a bunch of other guys, or, potential candidates or what have you. But yeah, Trevor, no idea on Sark and who he could be adding to his coaching staff. And Trevor will close us out. What are you hearing on our next running backs coach? Well, glad that you asked, because, of course, as you're listening to this, we just announced that a few minutes ago as that news broke. A.J. Stewart from Oregon State, the new Baylor running backs coach, replacing Justin Johnson. So A.J. Stewart, the name, and that answers your question. So we do appreciate you being a part of the mailbag this week. And more coming down. I haven't seen a whole bunch of follow-up on A.J. Stewart outside of that one Adam Rittenberg tweet that he will also be assistant head coach. Mm-hmm. So that is obviously very notable. And, yeah, looking forward to hearing more about him and learning more. But obviously there's some connections there that have come into play from his days at BYU. I think he also knew Aranda a bit. Not positive on that, but I thought I read about some crossover last night on the board. So that was a name that was floating out there, and there seemed to be some smoke behind that. And, in fact, today he is announced as the guy. So, man, a lot of ground covered in this week's episode. My goodness. You got everybody, nearly 20 names from the portal and the high school ranks now on campus. You've got a new running backs coach in A.J. Stewart just announced from Oregon State. You've got the loss of running backs coach in Justin Johnson. You've got the big quarterback question answered as far as at least one name goes in Sawyer Robertson, although you've mentioned Tristan Gebbia as a potential, and he'd also be an Oregon State guy, by the way. Yep, but that's a connection that maybe comes into play. But he could very well add some more depth. We will see on that. And, yeah, man, this college football thing, it never slows down, does it?
Never. Neither does recruiting, which has been kind of, especially with the portal, hot and heavy over the last few weeks. And then now we got Junior Day. I mean, just so much going on recruiting and football-wise. I'm just excited for, the dead period to get here and then spring ball to start up.
Yeah, transfer portal close up shop here in, 2 days? And so that'll at least give us a little bit of a reprieve from that. Could be some action on Baylor's end, although that's not in their control as best as I can tell, on trying to potentially add another name before then. So we will see how that plays out. But there is, movement behind the scenes as far as trying to make some other things happen. So we'll obviously keep you updated on that on the Sikkim365.com premium boards. Basketball, men in action tonight. Women need to bounce back. And I appreciate the questions, and I hope I was clear in kind of how I answered that as respectfully as I could. But it's just, we're not going to play hindsight game over and over. But I do think that, some winning would go a long way for Nikki Collin and company. So we'll see if they can't bounce back this week as well. Grayson, anything before we go here?
No,
man?
Just be sure, stay on Sikkim 365 Premium site. If you're not a member, go check it out. We have a lot of content, a lot of really cool features, lots of news and notes. We're about to get baseball really ramped up as that season's kind of right around the corner. Football recruiting, football notes, all kinds of stuff on the premium side. And, of course, 365 Sports Radio, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6. Check that out on the YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I'll be back with Paul here in a couple of hours from now, a little less than a couple of hours, and we'll be talking, obviously, A.J. Stewart, but also a lot of what's going on in college football and, NFL as well. Cowboys with a big playoff win last night. I know Paul definitely wants to talk about that. He's barely ever seen one of those before, so I'm sure he'll want to reflect in all of that glory. But that was, in all seriousness, a good win for them, so we'll be touching on that and a lot of other things as well coming up today at 3. But until next time, thanks to Garrett Ross. This has been the Bearcast for Grayson Grundhoefer. I'm Craig Smoak on Sikkim365.com.